Probably one of my favorite parts of being on camp is being one of the first people up in the morning. Regardless of how tired it was to get the kids to bed the night before, there's something just pleasant and simple, I'd even use the word gentle about camp mornings, um, assuming everything's okay. It's just this quiet moment of peace and calm and comfort before the chaos of the camp ensues, which it inevitably will. But there's just this really peaceful aspect to the morning of a camp away. Everyone's in a different headspace. You're usually someplace, different or pretty or meaningful. And it's just kind of my favorite part of the whole thing. And that word gentleness, is a word that we don't use very often when it comes to experiences of faith. Yet it's one of the fruit of the Spirit that God lists. And it's one that we need to wrestle with. What does gentleness actually look like? And unfortunately, when we look at the history of the Christian church, gentleness is not necessarily the first word that comes to mind when you have things like the Inquisition, or the Crusades, or whatever is going on in America right now. Well, this concept of gentleness seems to be one that we lose very quickly, yet it is a fruit of the Spirit that God longs to bring out in each of us, a spirit of gentleness. I guess for myself, I wrestle to know what that actually looks like on a day-to-day basis, especially on a camp, which sometimes gentleness is not always the best option. How does one develop a spirit of gentleness? And I think as I reflect on it, the words of Jesus from the Beatitudes kind of come to mind. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the world. And I wonder if meekness and gentleness go together, because at the core ideas of both of those is this sense of traveling lightly in the world, of not forcing things to happen or forcing your will on others or forcing obedience to a particular idea. Now, there is place for that, but the concept of gentleness and meekness, I think, always leave room for God to be God and for us not to be. I don't have to force my opinions on others. I don't have to force my way. I don't have to demand that everything conforms to my will, because really, that's God's job, and He's much better at it than I am. And that gives me space and pause to actually become gentle, to become meek, to allow those things which frustrate me or demoralize me, or when things don't go to my way, it's an opportunity to hand those over to God and allow Him to make them something that we could never make ourselves. And I think that's the coolest thing about camps, is that something special happens on them. Kids are put in a different mindset, in a different way of being, in a different way of doing, and they become different in the process. Not because we force it to happen, but because we create space for it to happen. And maybe that's what gentleness is all about. Creating space for you and me to become who God is calling us to be, not by force, but by the Holy Spirit. And that's not a bad thing.